Tony, I've always admired how you've navigated different organizations. You know, as a man of color, you seem to have done very well, and it's because you work pretty well with, you know, people under you and people over you. What advice would you give? I mean, clearly every executive is more sensitive to, you know, what's going on, but they don't always know how to react. What advice would you give to other, you know, executives about not just the Black Lives Movement, but just in general about diversity? And, you know, you're clearly doing a good job. Share some of your advice.
Yeah, I go back to my preface. First of all, thank you for that, Vinnie. And I go back to my preface, which is we really are approaching this with a sincere spirit of humility. We've got a lot of work still to do. If you go to, anyone listening can go to equality.com. Go to equality.com, you know, we are transparent about the representation of folks at the company, and in that you will see we have a significant amount of work to do. For example, you'll see that just 33% of the people that work at Salesforce today are women, but just 1 in 3. You'll see that today slightly less than 3% of the folks that work at Salesforce in the US are Black. And so I wouldn't argue that we're doing a great job or that we've been successful. We have a lot of work to do, very, very focused. The advice I would offer to folks, to everyone, is find a way to be an ally. Find a way to understand and learn and listen to the lived experiences of someone, you know, who has an identity different than your own. And that may start, you know, purely by listening, but then once you gain your footing, you know, by raising your voice and being a sponsor and a mentor and an advocate, you know, of being an active ally versus being a passive ally. You know, that it certainly comes with fear, and the fear of saying the wrong thing. And at one point, you know, I was talking to a leader about, you know, why they weren't more engaged, and the person said to me, "Closed mouth never has foot inserted," and the fear of just saying the wrong thing. And you know, people can be at times unforgiving, you know, if you don't get it quite right, which isn't the right way, in my view, to invite in and bring in allies. And so, overcoming that fear, even in this moment, even as a Black man in the midst of this racial equality and justice crisis, even sometimes I'm a little fearful of, am I saying that right? Am I getting it exactly right? So we all have this. Take the time, educate yourself, find a network of people to mentor you, to reverse mentor you, and to inform you about the issues, the perspective, the opportunity, the words to use, right? People ask me, should I say, is it okay to say Black, or should I say African American, right? It was fair and legitimate questions. It's okay to say Black, but if you're stuck at that point of not having the language, because obviously language is the critical tool of leadership, you're frozen in your ability to act. So educate yourself, talk to folks of varying identities, bring them into your circle, bring them into your team, into your leadership team, and those are really, really important ways to act. And then as companies, find ways to use your platform. Use this moment to sharpen your focus, to clarify your aspirations, and to clarify your values and what it is in the season and the coming seasons, the near term, the midterm, what it is that you hope to accomplish to make your company and to make society at large a better place. You think about these crises that we're facing, the pandemic, the economic crisis, racial equality and justice crisis, and this is the defining moment, and it's going to change. It's fundamentally, you know, every important aspect of society, right? When you think about the nature of work as it was at the end of 2019, and what the nature of work would be like at the beginning of 2021, right? And all the ideas and all the dogma of, well, you must come into the office or you can't be productive, you can't really collaborate. You think about the nature of education, right? And the way we traditionally thought about education, of a school is a place, it's a physical place you must go to, and clearly that's not the reality today, and for the short and midterm, you know, it won't be the reality for many kids around the world, certainly in the U.S. And so it's going to fundamentally change. We think about the nature of our justice system, the nature of economic opportunity. This is a moment of reset, and it's a time where dogma is stripped away, and things that were long held fallacies of you must be in this physical location in order to do X. You know, people are seeing the reality of new ways to collaborate and inventing and imagining new ways. And the challenge that's ahead of us is to take this moment and to use those opportunities to make the world a more equal place, a more fair place, with more opportunity for all, as synergistic. It's going to create a more vibrant recovery to our economy and economies around the world, and create more opportunity for everyone. So I say, aim high, think about the reset, think about these fundamental things and how we use this moment to reinvent and reimagine these core aspects of society for the better, so that we're sitting here, when the pandemic has passed and the economy hopefully is recovering, still faced with racial equality and justice crisis, and we're doing all that we can to make the world a better place.
Evolved. So what we're seeing now is a really focus on belonging, and the difference we say is diversity is a fact. Do you have diverse representation or not? Inclusion is really a behavior. Are you creating equal opportunities across the board? Are you including everyone equally? Belonging is really the sentiment. How does a person feel? Do they feel like they're part of a culture that cultivates belonging? And so the belonging is turning out to be the most important, or becoming the more important one, but you have to really look at all of them. Not just the diverse representation, but that's why we call it VIBE: value, inclusion, belonging, and equity. Go beyond representation to make sure that you put as much emphasis on the inclusion, belonging, and equity as well. And then the next piece is really creating that accountable system. So how do we help organizations go from goal setting to goal getting? How do we provide what we call accountable analytics, not actionable, but accountable? And that's how they can go from intentions to getting the outcomes. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I think at the heart of our approach is being able to, first see your outcomes. So what are you seeing? That's the VIBE index. What are the outcomes I'm getting from my diversity and belonging efforts? Where am I, and where do I have the greatest impact for change? And then based on the outcomes I'm getting, really looking to the factors that are causing the reasons behind why you're getting the outcomes that you have, and then being able to take the actions. And we say Workday HCM, but really what that means is talent acquisition, talent optimization, compensation for pay equity, and of course the employee experience, right? And then what's really important is looking at and understanding all the unique attributes of your employees that make up their experience. So what's happened in the past, traditional systems, they looked at outcomes at the employee level. So this looks good. If I look at average promotion, average belonging, average attrition, that all looks great. But we have to really look at the intersectionality. So not just male and female, African American and Asian, but combining the connections between the fact that I'm female and Asian, and I may be Generation X. So really starting to look at the intersections, because it's these intersections that are really defining their sense of belonging, their sense of inclusive, and really tailoring their experience. So this is what's really different about the VIBE Index. And what's unique about our offering is where we've been investing since Karen Taylor started 3.5 years ago, is really making a robust capability to capture, to self-identify across all of these different dimensions. So, we have customers with 65, 85 gender codes, all the different definitions and breakdowns of ethnicity that you want to capture, to sexual orientation, to pronouns, to religion. So we support all of these attributes, and these are the attributes that we can bring together into what we call intersections, multiple dimensions. And what's important about that is if we drill into that 80% average belonging across all employees, and we start to look at it as intersections, we see a completely different picture. So what we thought we had a good sense of belonging, we're finding that male Asians are not having as high of a sense of belonging as we see with male and female white people. And then this underrepresented minority is URM. So that's really important. So this is really the journey that we went on with Workday, and that our customers are now going on. Is in the past, analytics never brought intersection into play. It only looked at gender, or it only looked at race. It didn't look at the combination.
All the work, all the good stuff that's happened over the last 6 years, with this topic coming up to the top, the topic around equity in the workplace, whether it's pay or promotion or all of those things. Unfortunately, COVID has set us back so much so that we may end up erasing all of that progress.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So since the COVID has started, women have added on.
Is that because maybe ethnicities become more important in the last few months? Or why would you say it's affected the sexual differences that much?
Yeah, it's crazy, right? So absolutely, the intersectionality component is a super, super important part of this topic. So overall, kind of the all women level, women on average are doing 15 hours more work at home, domestic kind of work than they were before COVID. So they're on top of that, right? 15 hours. And I can personally attest to that. As a result, compared to before the pandemic, so it was like March or February, women now, 1 in 4 women now are considering leaving the workplace because of COVID. Yeah. And that is twice.
It's because they're having to teach kids at home, do a lot more at home.
All of a sudden we have to choose again. And that's really ultimately what it comes down to, Vinnie. That's the difference. We now are back to shoot. Do we choose between my career, my work, or my family? So we as leaders have got to pay attention. Why are we having this as the choice? Why are we doing this again? When the truth is kind of the hope, some of the early data I saw when this first happened were like, yay, finally work from home. And then the reality of, yes, but then there's all the other stuff we still have to take care of. And it's been adding on. It's not as if our kids and everyone else is, if we have kids at home, are being, taken care of somewhere else. So there's absolutely that. The other thing though is that broken rung, and we might have talked about this before. The broken rung is basically there's this bit of the ladder that's missing for women when it comes to promotion. And so now during COVID, what we're seeing, those promotions are actually getting a bit worse. So for every 100 men who are promoted, it's gone from like 89 or 90% would be women down to 85. So for every 100, there's now 85 women getting promoted. And so we can't not start to question, wait a minute, does that mean we as leaders have that unconscious thing coming back into our brains going, she can't possibly, help her kid with her homework and do a conference call, right? Like it's absolutely crazy. On the other part, you had talked about the intersectionality. Women of color are 6 times more likely to leave, right? So comparing to the average for white women, 4 times. Why? Because of how women make decisions. They are relational in their decision making. If I close the country down, if I do, the mask only, if I keep the country open but have strict rules around what you can do, how would it impact the disease, the spread of the disease, these constituents? So I really do hope that we as leaders in the private sector are looking at those leaders in the public sector who are women and the impact they've been able to have.
I think that Silicon Valley is guilty of ageism, probably with the renewed emphasis on racial diversity, particularly for underrepresented people in Silicon Valley. The ageism may, take a back seat. But I think a lot of the ageism at Silicon Valley it doesn't need to occur. And in fact, there are plenty of role models to show why it shouldn't occur. I will grant you that consumer technology has always been, in the province of young people because they see consumer trends. It's impossible to imagine, that you could be, roughly our age and running TikTok. You just wouldn't see the way things are unfolding. And you wouldn't be able to react to it. But when you look at the enterprise tech sector, my gosh, the previously mentioned Bill McDermott is 59 or 60. Tom Siebel, you interviewed Ed Abbo, is number 2 a few weeks ago. Great interview, by the way. But, Tom is going to be 68 in September, and he's leading, C3.ai after, enormously successful career. You think about Dave Duffield at Workday, starting Workday in his 60s and still being involved in the company. I mentioned Hasso Plattner, one of the founders of SAP, leading a renaissance of the company quite late in his life. And I think that enterprise tech really lends itself to that more, to the person who maybe they're not the coder they once were, but they see the big picture in a way. They have industry knowledge, they have wisdom, they've seen this play or that play before, they've been to that rodeo. And, you know, in the long sales cycle of an enterprise software sale, you know, all of those things really help. And so, you know, you see leadership there. Secondly, I think this low code, no code environment that is changing enterprise software, much as much as decades before, Apple learned how to hide the complexity of everything it did and made everything beautifully vertically integrated and beautiful to look at and to operate. And as enterprise software goes that way, it's going to open up opportunities for people who aren't cutting edge coders, you know, which again is sort of a door that favors the young, you know, versus the old. There's fascinating brain research around when we bloom and why and where we bloom. And there are certain professions where you do see people blooming early. Rapid fire coding under a time pressure favors the young. It's just the way young brains are built. You know, it's like young Major League Baseball pitchers throw with a greater velocity than they will, you know, 10 years later. But if they evolve as a pitcher, they learn more pitches, they learn to be crafty, they learn to be canny, they can read the batter's body language, they become more disciplined about studying film, and they can have very effective careers, even though they aren't the speed demons that they once were. And I think as we get into our 30s, 40s, and 50s, we have greater capacity to lead, to inspire, to communicate, to multi-process. And then as we get into our 60s and 70s, we have this great ability to tie things together and to teach. You know, that which has been called wisdom throughout the millennia. There's a neuroscientist at NYU named Elkanan Goldberg, who in his own case, in his late 60s, he was coming up with intuitions that would be proven out when he did the actual disciplined math and science around intuition. It would turn out his intuition would be more often correct than not. His batting average for intuitions proving to be accurate got higher and higher. And his theory, and it's, you know, it's a controversial theory, but his theory is that the networks that connect the two sides of our brain, the logical side, which is also the memory storage side, along with the side that likes stimulus and novelty and creativity, there's more and more communications. It's almost like the brain is saying, how do you look at this? How do you see the world? Well, you know, I can understand why you're exciting, but look, when I stack it up against previous things, you know, that looked kind of similar, you know, it didn't really pan out. And so, so that gets better as we get older, provided we stay in good health. You know, we haven't had a stroke, we stay physically fit and mentally alert. We don't become couch potatoes. So I think it's all very encouraging. I would say, practically speaking, and I've gone on here, but this is an important point. I think too many industries and companies have what we'd call an up and out career path. You get raises and you get more responsibility. You have people reporting to you, and up and up and up you go until, you know, let's say you're in your middle 50s and somebody in the finance department of your company says, my God, we pay that person a lot of money, A. And two, you know, there's this person 10 years younger than this that we need to either make room for in upper management levels, or we're going to lose that person. So now the person in their middle 50s gets fired. They get a buyout package if the company's healthy, but they get, you know, they're let go. And I think if we could replace that with sort of a career arc, you know, if we could come to a common agreement, if we could have a rational discussion where adults are talking to their, you know, good people, good contributors, you know, with an adult-minded mentality, are talking with HR and legal and negotiating a backside of the arc career package. It might look like this. You give up your title. You're no longer executive vice president. You're going to give up a big chunk of your compensation package. But you also will get to give up working 60 and 70 hours a week. You know, let's negotiate something. How much do you want to work? Oh, 30 is good enough for me. And I want to have some outside projects. Okay, let's negotiate a package that will reflect that. And then here are your new duties. They're going to evolve over time, so you become an internal consultant and a coach. And I think once you remove the title, then you remove and people know where they are on the career arc, then you remove the kind of defensiveness you see sometimes upper level executives where they undermine, the careers of people who might take their jobs, because it's now understood you're on the other side of the arc. I would love to see, I'm told that HR departments and legal departments just say it's a legal landmine if you go there, but some visionary companies and some leaders like Mark Benioff, who have a lot of moral clout in the Valley, I'd love to see him take a look at that.